I guess it's time to put my fuel gauges in. I got them out, took them all apart, cleaned them up. They were pretty cruddy inside. I powder coated the bodies of them here black. I cleaned up, these are glass tubes. I wiped those out and cleaned those up real good. They were kind of grungy, you could barely see through them anymore. And I've cleaned up the fittings and stuff. I've got everything pretty much that's exposed, powder coated black to keep it from reflecting. I'm going to redo the tops of them here where they came out and make it a little more efficient, a little better. We'll get the elbows and a fitting here to go out, and then these T's will go on. These are a regular barb fitting for a 1/4 inch hose, and they've got a 37-degree AN coupling on the end of them. Before they just had a flare fitting on them, a piece of 1/4 inch tubing flared with a regular flare nut on it, and coming out, and the hose just went over the top of that. There wasn't a barb on it or anything. Well, this will be better with the barbs on it. To get a hose clamp on it, there's no way those things are coming apart or leaking. My balls were kind of discolored. One of them disappeared. Well, I got 2 new balls, and we'll get new. I got Vitron gaskets. These cork gaskets, they have a tendency to flatten out over time and leak, and I think those were leaking a little bit. These little Vitron gaskets I made, they have a real small opening in them. You see these ends here, these 90s with these hose barbs on them, they're filled up with solder and then just drilled out with a fine hole. You don't want a whole lot of fuel going through there, and if you crack a glass or something, you don't want it all fuel spilling out. So these have kind of a limited hole in them. They have a larger one in the top on the glass than they do on the bottom. I've got, of course, some thread sealant for the pipe threads and some sea lube for some of the other threads, just to keep everything lubed up and closed up. This 90 hose barb goes in the bottom. It's just 1/8 inch pipe thread and then out to a hose barb, and it's threaded for 1/8 inch down here on the bottom. And then this thing is machined out larger diameter for this glass tube to fit down in there. And so a gasket goes down in there underneath this glass tube, and then you have the bushing. This top is a larger diameter. I think that's 3/8 inch pipe thread, but anyway, it's a larger diameter. So this bushing goes down in there against another gasket and puts pressure down between the 2 gaskets in this glass tube to seal it up. And then that bushing is threaded for 1/8 inch pipe thread. And then that's what this other 90. Now ordinarily they would just have another 90 just like this one coming out of that. But since we're going a little different, we have to split off of that with a T for that vent line. We have to rig up a little bit different than what would be normal on there. I put just a little bit of fuel lube on this gasket going in there. You don't want to put too much on there because that fuel lube is not soluble in gasoline, so we don't want to get any of it in this hole here where the fuel goes up through. I just put just a little bit on it to help keep that gasket soft and to just kind of help make a seal on there, but you really don't want to put anything on there for sealing or anything. If you plug up that hole, then the fuel gauge is not going to work at all. So, and sea lube or fuel lube is non-soluble, so the gasoline won't just eventually eat it out and start passing through after it's had a chance to dissolve it. Well, I put the lower gasket in, and I put the glass tube in there, and then there's another gasket on top of it, and now it's just time to put this bushing in. I suppose there's probably a special type of driver, or I could make a driver to put that in. It's slotted here, and you need something that'll go down in there and turn those slots without damaging the threads on the inside. But I don't have a tool for it, and I don't want to take the time to make one. You got to be careful here now not to tighten that bushing in too tight. That bushing has to go in tight enough to compress that gasket down on the glass and the glass down on the lower gasket. But if you get it too tight, of course, then it's going to break that glass. I'm going to use this fitting here, and that's what threads into that bushing anyhow. And if I put this in and tighten it up, then I could use this as a lever to tighten the bushing up. And I want to turn it so that it's pointing the same direction as this other nipple down here on the bottom. Okay, that one lines up pretty good. Oh, I don't want to tighten that any tighter than that, because if I do, that'll probably put too much pressure on that glass and crack it, break it, and that would make me cry. I've got these two put together now. New gaskets, glass all cleaned up, new balls, both of them. Gookumpucky around all the threads. Threads are all cleaned up, nice and powder coated. This 90 that comes out of this housing is a male on one end, goes into the housing, into that bushing, and it's a female on the other end, so that this fitting can fit on there. And this fitting is a male 1/8 inch pipe thread on one end and a 1/4 inch flare fitting on the other end. This end that goes on here will go on from the outside of the wing root, between the wing root and the wing, and then one of them will go, this one here will go to the vent line, and then this one will go over with another barb and go over to the fuel tank. Well, these will go on after it gets put on the airplane. Now I've got a little piece of 1/4 inch fuel line cut here for a bushing to help hold that as a standoff against that wing root. That helps stabilize the fuel gauge once we get it in. The one on the right side, we fit this T on there, and then that fuel vent or fuel equalization line, whatever the hell that thing is on there, it's got a flare fitting on the end of it, and it screws right into this T. The one on the left side, the fuel line, the 1/4 inch vent line, was not quite long enough, so I used my Parker beading tool and put a bead on it, and so this one will go on, this barb fitting will go on there, and then this fuel hose will slip over that that line, the hard line on the other side. Got the fuel gauges in. There's the left one. And here's the rib side of the wing side of the right one. I may have to cut this out a little bit more here on this bottom, this nipple, to get a wrench in there to tighten up the hose clamp when I put the fuel hose on there. I haven't put it on yet because I don't want it sticking out here flopping around, getting caught on anything or catching anybody's head. And here's the hook up here on the top. That's the T there. It's tightened up in there. And then this side over here, the fuel line was long enough that I could run up and flare it and put a AN fitting on there. Tie that right into that T. Again, I didn't put the barb on this that goes out to the fuel tank because it stick out and get caught on things, particularly my head or something else. There's looking at the right one on in the airplane. And here's the wing side of the left one here. Now this one I didn't quite have enough tubing to come up all the way to tie in with a flare fitting like I did the other one. I cut it off back here a little ways, put a bead on that tube, and then put the hose clamps on there, put a length of hose on there, and that's a hose barb. Be the same thing that comes out off of this one to go to the fuel tank. One of the things I've learned over the years of helping maintain airplanes is that guys, when they're putting things together and you've got all kinds of room around here, everything's all opened up, they don't really think about how you're going to get something apart once it's all together, or how you're going to work on something when it's all together. These hose clamps like this, the guy will put them on and he'll just have them stuck up here with the nut straight out. And but thinking about it, the most likely way that it ever work on that, if you ever worked on it, would be down through the wing root with the wing on. The other way would be down through the top. But this way, working on it from the bottom, you can go up through here with a wrench and loosen these up and take them off if you had to. If you come down from the top, then you're screwed and out of luck. But I noticed that on a lot of things, they don't really think about how to line these up so that they're easier to get to when everything is all assembled. And it makes it kind of a pain when you're maintaining something sometimes to get in on that stuff.